Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back. Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer with you guys. And I'm wanting to just do an audio session today. And I have something very specific that I'd like to share with you guys. It's basic, very basic, but so fundamental and crucial in your absolute grounding building blocks to understanding astrology. And so what we're going to explore today, just briefly from one particular level, because there's many levels to this, is the concept of polarity in astrology. Okay. So before I start speaking to that, I'd just like to adjust this chart and bring it back to about here. So I've deliberately taken everything out of the chart because this enables you to have a much more centered and clear focus on what you see there, which is the 12 zodiac signs and the 12 houses. And I want your attention to be just purely on the 12 zodiac signs and their polarity point. Now, when you are working with astrology and you are working with an individual, you're working with a whole person. There's a whole person there that has, so many layers that fit into a number of different streams and spectrums. So just because somebody is born under the sign of Aries and their sun sign is Aries, it doesn't necessarily mean that that individual is going to present with the typical classical traditional archetypal expression of Aries. And you probably have had that experience where you've met people and you may have asked them what's their sun sign, and they say to you, I'm an Aries or I'm a Libra. And you run off a few sort of key words to them and you say, oh, you must be like this and you must be like that and you must be really fiery and really impatient and, relating to Aries and so on and so forth. And the person's response may very well be, well, no, actually, I've actually got really good patience. I've really consciously sort of worked on that, and I'm actually quite a patient person. So they're giving you the opposite of what you would, assume and think based on the expression, the traditional, a traditional characteristic or expression of the sign of Aries. And the reason that that happens, and the reason that no one human being fits into the sort of simplistic, if you like, description of any zodiac sign, is because what they are experiencing, and this obviously depends on every single individual, what they are experiencing is a spectrum of Aries and Libra. So let's just stick with Aries and Libra as the example throughout this audio session to just have our mind focused on this one polarity. So if you are a sun sign Aries, then you are really working with a spectrum of energy that runs between Aries and Libra. So there might be certain people that are, typically archetypal Aries in their characteristics and the way they live their life. And then you might meet others who are more on the spectrum of Libra. You see, when it comes to the polarities, every zodiac sign has its polarity point. As you can see here in this chart, Aries is opposite to Libra, Taurus is opposite to Scorpio, Gemini to Sagittarius, Cancer to Capricorn, Leo to Aquarius, Virgo to Pisces, right? So when you are looking at any one house or any one sign in the zodiac, do not fall into the trap of just working with the sign on its own and not taking into consideration its polarity point. The polarity point is also the shadow to each sign. So if you're a Taurus, your shadow is Scorpio. If you're a Cancer, your shadow is Capricorn. So these polarity energies, that the spectrum between one sign to the other, exist inside all of us, because we all have these archetypes living within us anyway. But of course, as per our sun sign, moon sign, and ascendant sign, we are living and expressing certain archetypes more so than others. However, when it comes to the planets in the birth chart, which I have none in this chart at the moment, but if you can just imagine your own birth chart, let's just say that this is your chart and you have Aries rising, and let's just say that you have Mars in Aries as well, located here in the first house. Well, that Mars energy is going to have the classic, traditional archetypal expressions of what Mars means to be in Aries, which can certainly be experienced as, a very aggressive, impatient, selfish, self-centered, pushy kind of energy. Those characteristics are there. They are there within the Aries archetype. There's no debating that. The point is, though, that when a person has Mars in Aries, for instance, particularly if you are looking at the chart from an evolutionary perspective, then the Mars in Aries person is here to evolve through that Mars in Aries, but they cannot do it unless they integrate the polarity, which is Libra. So a Mars in Aries person really has to find that middle ground between Aries and Libra in how that Mars functions. Because if it stays at the purely archetypal Aries level, it's not evolving. It's not integrating its polarity, which is Libra, and that's the very thing it needs to do to evolve the energy of that Mars. And that same concept and same principle would be applied to any planet in the chart, because every planet is evolving through its archetype. In other words, every soul, every person that incarnates into this physical realm, into this physical body, and is born at a particular time, place, and location, is born with very specific themes and signatures and hereditary sort of aspects of what they're born into, as we can see from the birth chart and all the planets in the chart. But how that is going to be expressed and manifested and worked through, and how the person consciously works through these energies, how they ultimately evolve, is a very, very unique experience for every single human being on the planet. And this is where we can really connect with or apply the understanding of free will. The consensus reality or perspective that people hold about astrology is that they can have an aversion or a fear about it, or have, a very negative outlook on it, because they have a misconception that astrology is not giving them the sense of free will in their life, because it's determining who they are and what they should be doing and shouldn't be doing. And that's not true at all. In fact, it's quite the opposite. We all have a free will. From a personality level, the personality certainly wants free will. The personality would not like to think for a moment that it's bound by anything, or that it's fated in any kind of way. But from a soul perspective, the soul has made very specific choices about the life it's going to live when it incarnates. So the family it's born into, the experiences it's going to have, the relationships. Where is the soul seeking to evolve? Why is it seeking to evolve on those levels? Where is the soul on its evolutionary path currently? So that's the way, in my view at least, that's certainly one very powerful way to be viewing the chart, because then you're not placing limitations on an individual or a soul. Any limitations are really just posed by the mental construct, that one has or creates, the mental perspective that one has on things. The soul decides and chooses, so that for the personality might feel uncomfortable, and that would be the case when the soul and the personality are not integrated. They're not in unison. They're not aligned. So there's this discord and disconnect between the personality and the soul. And the personality is running out there wild, trying to do its own thing, thinking it's got a handle on everything. But the very fact that it's not aligned with its soul's intentions is what can make life a lot more difficult, because there's an extreme discord that takes place. Now, getting back to the polarities, so those are just some thoughts for you guys to reflect on when you are looking at a birth chart. Any sign you look at, or any house you look at in the birth chart, never ever fail to take into consideration the polarity point. And that is the same principle when you're looking at transits in the birth chart as well. When you have a planet transiting your 4th house, well, it's opposite your 10th house. So just by the sheer nature that there's an opposition being formed, it naturally brings in the opposite house into its field of experience. Naturally, the primary focus will be in the actual house that the planet is transiting in, but it is very important to take into account its polarity point. So this is the same principle when you are looking at a birth chart and you are looking at a house or a zodiac sign or a planet in a zodiac sign. You're always thinking in terms of pairs. Nothing works in isolation in this field of experience. Everything is connected and linked, and astrology really describes that very beautifully, just through this concept of polarity. So remember that each sign and house has its polarity point. They're not separate. They are almost one and the same. They are the same thing, the same field, but at opposite ends of the spectrum, right? So when you're looking at Aries and Libra, well, there's the individual self. Now, the opposite point being Libra is the other. So you have self and you have other, right? So that's the mirror of who you are, as it were. You can't have a relationship just with yourself and yourself only and nobody else on this planet. The idea is absurd, isn't it? Because that would mean that you would be the only human being on this planet. And you're not. So, there are, I think close to 8 billion people on the planet now. So relationships, which is very much described by Aries and Libra, is the experience in life that's mirrored through these archetypes. So when we meet ourselves, or we meet another, or we meet ourselves in another, we are experiencing the Aries Libra polarity and energy on so many different levels. Life is really a mirror of relationships, and each relationship that's presented to you is mirroring back to you a lot of unconscious and subconscious components of your own self. When you have a pretty strong reaction to somebody in a interaction of some kind that's significant, the strong reaction can be, one of love and joy and pleasure, but it can also be one of anger, frustration, resentment, distress, etc. Both those ends of the spectrum belong to the polarity of Aries and Libra in terms of relating, sharing, and seeing in another attributes that perhaps you admire or love or appreciate, or the opposite, attributes that turn you off, repulse you, and so forth. It is always important to examine both ends of the spectrum when you are in relationships. So what I'd like to do is just give you guys some key points to the 12 houses, and understanding as I'm reading this information, because I'm going to be reading it, and I will reference the book in case any of you do want to get it. I really like the way this individual has summarized the 6 polarities, the 6 houses. And the way he begins to introduce the concept of polarity in his thinking is really kind of what I've already said, that when you are looking at a zodiac sign, or when you are looking at a house, you never look at it just in isolation and think of it as a stand-alone archetype, because it's not. It has its opposite point, its polarity point, its shadow point, and they are both working together. It's just that any given individual or soul is at either one end of the spectrum or somewhere in the middle or somewhere along that line of the spectrum of those 2 archetypes, in terms of those archetypes being experienced, expressed, and evolved. So nothing works in isolation. That's the key point. And everything is connected and linked. And this is a holistic way of really understanding the 12 zodiac signs, the 12 houses, the astrological birth chart. Okay, so let me just read a couple of comments. The other idea to integrate into this, according to this individual's thinking, is that when you think about the signs and the houses, because they are working together, they are a polarity, they are an axis, so they're not separate, they are working together. It's always connected to some kind of bartering, some kind of agreement, some kind of deal, some kind of transaction between one and the other. There's some sort of agreement. There's an exchange process going on. There's a giving and a receiving process going on with all these archetypes, with all these houses. So the 1st and 7th house is very much connected to identity and recognition. This polarity reveals the need of the individual to establish his own identity and have it recognized and validated by others as being okay. This is the 1st house. However, to do so, he must be willing to give equal recognition to the identity of others and be willing to validate them as also being okay. So the bargain here is I'll offer you recognition and identity as the person that you are in your own right, as long as you do the same for me. So that's the 1st and 7th house, Aries, Libra. There's got to be this mutual exchange of acknowledgement on both parts. 2nd and 8th house, which are matters around property and sex. This polarity reveals the need of individual possessions and the physical sharing of oneself with another person through sexual interaction. Money is often the commodity being exchanged, the bargain. I'll offer you something I possess for some asset you possess in exchange. Of course, the greatest physical asset we possess is our own physical body, which we give in the act of sex. So that's where the exchange and interchangeable energy takes place with the 2nd and the 8th house. The 3rd and 9th is very much about freedom and wisdom, our ideas, knowledge, which are intangible assets that we possess, and they can't be traded. No one can, take something out of your mind and claim it to be their own, although people do those things, and that's why copyright laws have been created and etc. In no area or our being are we freer than within our own minds. That's very true, isn't it? Our thinking is limited only by self-imposed limitations. So the bargain here is let's exchange ideas, for the truth shall give us both greater freedom. That's the 3rd and 9th house. See, the 9th house is the one that teaches the wisdom and the truth and expands the consciousness. And the 3rd house is where one listens, you could say. The 4th and 10th, these are just some key ideas. As I said at the very start, there's much, much more to this, many more layers, but these are just some key ideas for you if you have not considered this already. 4th and 10th house, group identity and security. This house polarity deals with our perception of what makes us feel secure. Perception of what makes us feel secure. Now, that's the 4th house, right? 4th house is self-image. It's our own personal self-image of who we think we are. And it's the house that gives us an inner sense of security or not, depending on what's going on in that 4th house. I'll just start that sentence again. This house polarity deals with our perception of what makes us feel safe and secure and what makes us feel powerful or more powerful. In this area of life, we are bargaining for greater power from those more powerful than we, 10th house, public standing and reputation, and in return, exchanging part of our personal security to obtain it. As in all trades, it involves sacrifice. And a classic example of this is people in the public eye who give up such an important portion of their private life. That's the sacrifice they make to be famous. That's an obvious observation, isn't it? 5th and 11th, the pursuit of happiness. This polarity deals with the exchange of intangible commodities and assets like love, children, vacations, hobbies, and what we have come to call the good life that tend to bring us greater enjoyment and happiness. This polarity deals with our romantic desires and needs, whereas the 2nd and 8th house polarity dealt with things physically, excuse me, conceived through sexual activity. This polarity deals with things mentally conceived. The basic bargain here is Of course, love me and I will love you. So that's the fifth house. The fifth house is a huge area that describes love, how we love, how we want to be loved, the love we give, more the love we give actually, because it's the heart, it's our own heart source center. So it's the love we give. And the 11th house polarity, you could say, is that the love that we are looking for through external people, measures, experiences, and so forth. The most complex would certainly have to be 6 and 12, which is really about service. Both houses have to do with service and sacrifice. 12th house is the house of undoing. And the 6th house is where we have to get our shit together and we have to get it right. And depending on what planets you have in the 6th house, it can be a very, very complex area of life, the 6th house, when you have, especially if you have things like Saturn, Pluto in there, very challenging. But it is service, so we have to somehow serve through our own talents and skills and abilities and gifts, not for our own ego gratification, because that's 5th house Leo. When we move to the 6th house, there's an understanding that there is ego denial when we reach the 6th house. So the 6th house is not about your ego getting, all sort of pumped up. It's really about being modest and humble and giving your service for the greater plan or the greater good, or because you understand that you are an expression of the divine and a conduit of divine energy coming through you. And look, the 6th house is really very complex, as is the 12th. But I would add there the 8th and the 4th as well. I have actually done a video on the water houses and also the concept of the ego through the 12 zodiac signs, and what happens when it hits Virgo, Scorpio, and Pisces is a tremendous process unfolding, which is very useful to understand. So I might pop links to that video below, actually, for those of you that haven't seen it. It is worth seeing. Okay, so let's just wrap this up. Bargains relating to this polarity, meaning the 6th and 12th, this is the last one, are rather elusive. It's too simplistic to reduce it to the obvious. Serve me and I will serve you. Protect me and I will protect you. The type of bargain can range from simply dealing with others for the necessities of life, like food and clothing, to care for me and I will care for you, all the way to help me find my place in the universe and I will help you do likewise. Here, words and communication are put to the test of reality. It can be the supplement saying to God, do this for me and I will do this for you. It can mean suffer for me and I will suffer for you. The above descriptions are not especially meant to be complete in themselves. Rather, they are designed to give you some of the flavor of what is being bartered and what is being bartered for. You must also keep in mind that those things we conventionally associate with each house must also be considered in any analysis of the commerce taking place. So this is read from Robert Koljansky, and the book is called Interpreting the Eclipses. So it's actually a book on eclipses, but I really like his brief overview of these polarities, the 12 houses and the 12 zodiac signs, from the concept of this exchange going on between both polarities. So one doesn't exist without the other. one is getting something from the other one and vice versa. There's a pool or a space of exchange going on, and the exchange is characterized by what these polarities archetypally characterize and symbolize. But again, there's much more to each house, obviously, and each zodiac sign as well. The houses are a lot more complex than some people think, because there's many different levels to interpreting the astrological houses of the birth chart, and including esoteric astrology, which has quite a different spin on what each of the 12 zodiac houses mean. They have a very different expression on an esoteric level. But anyway, I thought that this might be useful for some of you, especially some of you who are fairly new to astrology. The most important point of this particular sharing today is to really encourage you to understand that the concept of polarity and the axis, which is drawing in two opposing points in the chart, need to be understood together, as working together. They might be not working together in the sense where the person might just be on one end of the spectrum and really struggling to evolve its polarity. That's likely to be the case for many souls on the planet, actually. But that does not mean that that polarity archetype is not there as potential for the soul of the person to integrate and to evolve. That's ultimately what the soul is achieving to do with all these archetypes. So whatever your Mars is in, whatever your Venus is in, all these planets need to be understood with their opposite sign, the polarity point as well. Okay, so I'll leave it there, and I'm hoping that little bit of information sheds some light and just gives you guys a little bit more to think about if you haven't been thinking in these terms. It's very, very important. I'll see you guys soon with a video as opposed to an audio. I just wanted to do something very quickly that is just faster in uploading, etc., technical stuff and so forth. Okay, guys, thank you so much for tuning in, and thanks so much for your beautiful comments and questions and feedback. And thank you for taking the time to listen and watch, and for subscribing. And if you haven't subscribed, please hit the subscribe button so you can be informed with when my next new video comes out, and so on and so forth. And if you're interested in having a chat with me about booking a session, please send me an email and we'll go from there. Much love and blessings. Thanks, and bye for now.